All right. I figured today I would do an overview of the full vehicle and sort of how the subsystems are broken down, and then also why I'm doing this series to some extent. So, personally, I worked on the majority of the cars for the 24-25, or the majority of the car subsystems for the 24-25, and then 25-26 years. Um, I completely redesigned the suspension, um, completely new uh, rear box design, finally getting us to having an actual transaxle. I did body panels design my second year, some new hubs, aluminum uprights, stuff like that. Um, and the main thing I found, especially the second year, was that onboarding people who had never really interacted too much with the car was very difficult because the car contains a bunch of subsystems that have to interact with each other and work together in order to create reasonable designs. So, as a quick overview, the OTR subsystems are chassis. So, that's all of these primary chassis tubes, along with the body panels. Um, Body panels kind of, in previous years, they kind of happen. This last year we did carbon fiber, so those took a lot more effort and those took actual designs. Previously, it was get your nearest piece of 22 gauge aluminum, cut it out with some shears until it mostly fits, and put Zeus fittings in. But now that we're actually made some carbon fiber panels, that took design work to make the molds. But other than that, chassis is pretty much the tubes and all the documentation that goes with it, and the sort of mounting points, although a lot of the mounting points are taken care of by the subsystems themselves. After that, we have drivetrain. So drivetrain is the engine, transfer case, axles, the hubs, the wheels, and the rims. For the hubs, you're only owning about a third of it, maybe. And here's where the interactions really start to build up. So suspension deals with control arms, shocks, and once again, they also need to own the hubs. Um, Suspension has influence on the hubs because the hubs mount into the upright and that needs to function. Everything needs to be set correctly. The hubs need to have the right offset. So your scrub radius, which is basically the center of your tire to the point at which the tire pivots around on your upright, is reasonable. Because if you don't, your steering is going to be a nightmare, which then, of course, ties into steering, having some ownership of the uprights. Steering, of course, owns the steering box, and then, however you want to divide this up, half the steering wheel, because Ergo also deals with the steering wheel, the seat, the shifter, which interfaces with drivetrain, the toe box, which interfaces with brakes. Brakes deals with the calipers and rotors. Um, the calipers then mount to the upright, so you need to deal with suspension on that regard. And then the rotors mount to the hubs. So, you know, you break up into subsystems. Everyone does their own thing, but really at all times, if you're changing the diameter of your rotor to make it smaller, make it lighter for the brakes, you're shrinking your brake rotor, what's that going to do? Well, your hub is probably going to have to change. So then drivetrain is like, whoa, 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 you're in my bolt pattern for the wheels. And then suspension is pissed off because you have to remanufacture all the uprights and redesign all the mountings for the brake calipers because the caliper has to move in with the rotor. So all these things kind of mesh together. There's very few important pieces on the car that actually get sort of designed in depth that don't interface with multiple subsystems. So don't just join your subsystem and never talk to anyone else. That's a bad idea. Everything needs to work together. When you get to comp and you do like your design presentations, it's a little bit different. There'll be a full vehicle presentation board because you'll have four judges. There'll be a drivetrain presentation. These are the only ones that get their unique judges. Uh, which sometimes the full vehicle judge will go ask a subsystem judge some question, depending. That has happened before. You'll get chassis plus ergo. So chassis is the bigger share of points here. So chassis gets 20 points, ergo gets 10. So you'll usually split the time, something like that. There's usually more validation in chassis, so you can talk about that for longer. And then suspension, steering, and brakes all have to share a judge. This breaks down into like 5 minutes of talking each. But suspension is the largest of the subsystems, so and the one with the most validation. Um, so once again, this is just something you have to deal with at comp. But these actually sort of reflect major combinations. Ergo has no large parts really, but they interface with everything. So Ergo interfaces with steering. They interface with brakes and drivetrain through the pedal box. Um, they don't really interface with suspension, I guess, other than some clearance stuff. So every subsystem has its own unique challenges in that regard. So if we look at, for example, last year's full vehicle board, this is where I think everyone should have an understanding of what you're judged on, because what you're judged on actually follows sort of a vehicle level engineering perspective, which is in the automotive industry considered to be the correct perspective, which is you define vehicle level goals. So in this case, you have some weight reduction goals, you have some packaging goals, you have some minimum capabilities here. Uh, Really, these goals should be more granular than this. So you should be looking at like, we want to achieve 38 miles per hour, 40 miles per hour, right? And then this cascades down into the subsystem. So the suspension needs to be able to take these impacts at 40 miles an hour and be durable enough. Your driver needs to be comfortable enough from an ergo perspective. Steering needs to be uh, stable enough at 40 miles an hour. Drivetrain needs to have the correct gearing and power and efficiency to actually get you to 40 miles an hour. Your brakes need to be able to stop you acceptably from 40 miles an hour. Like it all cascades down from your full vehicle goals, right? If you want to lose 10 pounds, then and that's the north star for your vehicle, you know, that needs to come down into the subsystems, and then each subsystem sort of figures out where they can lose 1, 2 pounds and cascades that back up into the full vehicle. So there's just some examples on here of new design versus old design where we're significantly improving the packaging, where we're losing weight by, say, switching to aluminum, um, all this kind of stuff, right? These are significant improvements. Drivetrain efficiency, for example, is a really big one for speed. Weight reduction is helps speed, helps durability because you're bouncing less weight around the track. Everything just is going to live longer. You have less force, less stress. Um, Brakes, floating brakes, this was a big improvement. So these are just all things you have to think about when you're going into design. And of course, for those interested, I will be trying to do a full overview video for each subsystem individually, talking about subsystem requirements. And then for some of the things, especially those that I personally did a lot of, like the transfer case, the brakes, the suspension, um, I'll provide, or I will do more videos about what my individual design decisions were, where the improvements are to be had, this kind of thing.